Hi, my name's Drew and welcome to another review video. Today I will be talking about Extraction, which is a film starring Chris Hemsworth. It's on Netflix. It is a Netflix film, so it should be available all over the world. I've seen it in the news everywhere, so I thought it looked interesting, and I hope that it would not be like Six Underground, despite being an action film that's on Netflix. And to give a short summary, yes, luckily it was not the same, it was far better. Just to give you a quick overview, the name of the film basically tells the story anyway, so it's about an extraction. You've got Chris Hemsworth, he works for this mercenary group, and they have to extract a young kid, a teenager, who is the son of a crime boss. It's not explained in too much detail, but you've basically got a classic story of two crime families, and one family kidnaps the other family's head's kid, the son in this case. And so Chris Hemsworth, he and his mercenary group, they're sent in to extract him. So the plot is nothing overly new, but the way it's done is what I very much liked about this film. Starting with the setting, it's set in Bangladesh and I think in part in India at the start, but mainly Bangladesh, and that's something I really like because you don't see that kind of setting in films too much. When it's Asia, it will be in maybe Japan or China or places like that. So it was very refreshing to have this setting in Bangladesh. The city has a very different feel to what you're used to. You can feel how it's all very crammed and there's so much going on in the streets, all these people moving about with the traffic, etc. So that immediately gave it a sort of heightened sense of tension because there's so many people all about. So if you put yourself in Chris Hemsworth's shoes, you're not quite sure who's around you, what's happening, where will it come from. And they actually use this pretty well in the film too. You have some scenes where maybe a car will suddenly come from. Okay, it's off camera, but still it just shows how chaotic these kind of venues, these places can be. Quite fitting with the venue is also the way it's shot. They have this, during daytime, they have this sort of orangey hue, giving everything a certain warmth, which really works in this setting. It's might be cliched, but that is exactly how I would picture it to look like if you would go and visit Bangladesh or India. That's why I hope it would look like, because these warm colours really work well with the surroundings in this film. So plot-wise, there's not that much to talk about. It's again, it's an extraction, so he's sent in to get out this boy. The plan goes wrong and they have to improvise and change things. And it's a bit of a cat and mouse game because they can't get out of the city as quickly as they want to, so they have to find alternate routes and find a designated pickup point for the helicopter to come in. Involved in this cat and mouse game is also a person who is working for, actually, the boy's father. He has been tasked with finding the boy, but you're quite unsure what his motives are and if that really is the case. Chris Hemsworth's character, he's also very sceptical of him. So this puts you very well in the boy's shoes, who in that moment isn't quite sure who he should trust. Should he trust this new guy who's come along, who has saved him in various situations, or should he trust the guy who's been working for his father, who he's known for pretty much, well, I don't know if it's all his life, but it's implied that he's known him for a longer time. I won't spoil the development there. Watch it yourself if you want to see how that goes. Story-wise, that's pretty much all I'll talk about. I like the story. It's very basic, of course, but I like the way it was going. You're obviously watching this film for the action. That's what you're there for, and I'm happy to reply that the camera work is excellent for this action. They do it in a sort of John Wick type way, the fight scenes, so it's all very practical based. It's not huge kung fu style fights, which as a martial artist, I enjoy these things. I also enjoy the highly artistic films, don't get me wrong, but in this case it just is more realistic. It fits the theme of the film a lot better if you have a more practical, realistic way of fighting. So it's based on efficiency, so you want the fights to be over very quickly. You want your opponents, your enemies, to be dispatched off very fast. And this is what happens here, so that's how Chris Hemsworth does it. So it's a bit like I say, it's a bit like John Wick, although I must say John Wick does it better. But it's a very good use of everything that's on his person as an instrument or a weapon. The death toll, as you can imagine, also rises quite a lot in this film. It's not too graphic, but a lot does go on. which is also something that's very fascinating because you can see the boy, he's quite, I think his name's Ori, or Ovi, that's his name. He's quite taken in by all this. You can see that he knows that his father is not a good guy, he's a crime boss, but you can, and that he obviously does evil things. But you can see that seeing all this happen firsthand is really putting a strain on him. It really affects him in a bad way. With all this great action goes great camera work. So I had dreaded once I realised that all this fighting would be happening in narrow confined spaces. You've got buildings, inside buildings a lot of the time, and all these gangways, etc. But luckily the camera is not what I had feared it would be, which would be a shaky cam all over the place and you couldn't follow what's happening. It's absolutely not that. So the camera is always placed in a way that you can really take in all of the action that's going on. You know clearly where we are, where people are coming from, where they're going to, all these things. It's very easy to follow, which I'm very happy about. I actually just read through the basic details of the film, as in who was involved, and it seems that the director actually is making his debut with this film, and he is a stunt coordinator. So that tells me that he knows obviously a lot about action, and you can tell, like I say, with action scenes that they're done by someone who gets it, who wants to show off what's happening. It shouldn't be trickery where we're concealing half of what's going on just to make the impression of good action. He makes sure that the action is good so that you can show all of it, and I really appreciate that. It works really well. You've got few scenes that seem to be quite long, as in they seem like one continuous shot, and I'm not quite sure how much of that was done continuously, but it looks very impressive when you think about how much is going on in that scene and what it must involve keeping the camera going while the action is continuing as well. So the main thing that this film is about, the action, it gets full points awarded here. Compared, I won't compare it too much, but compared to Six Underground, where you've got a bit of the shaky cam stuff going on and a bit of confusion as to what's happening, also because of just what the plot and the action there is and how it's designed, but that's another thing. So this, I would say, is a great action film. It's one in the one-man army category type of thing. Works really well. I like the pacing. You have more quiet moments that work really well. They're used to build the characters, to show other aspects of them. Chris Hemsworth, he is obviously the last comparison to Six Underground, I swear. It's again a case of a veteran who's lost someone. Although in this case, it's not about comrades that he's lost. It's about his own son, and you find out in the film it's due to an illness. So it's a bit different, but still, it's this category. It does make his character a bit more interesting, I must admit, because it's presented very early on in the film that he's basically got this death wish. So the reason he's doing all these mercenary jobs is just because he's hoping to get a bullet, basically. And that, I suppose, gives him a sort of edge, a sort of fearlessness, you could say. But it works really well. There's this one scene between his character, who's named Tyler, and Ovi, the kid, and they have this exchange where he tells him this backstory, and it's a very emotional scene. It's very powerful. I liked it because Chris Hemsworth, he's channeling the same emotion that he put into Thor in the last two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame. I personally thought, especially Infinity War, to me he was the best character in it. Not only from the story, but also because of Chris Hemsworth's acting, and it seems that he's trying to build on that reputation here. He doesn't want to just be the goofy guy in the goofy films, like Men in Black and obviously the Thor films, but he also wants to do these serious roles, and I think he pulled it off very well in this film, so I liked his acting, the way he portrayed this character. Generally, I was a bit surprised at how much thought is put into this film, into the plot. I gather it's based on a graphic novel. I don't know how much of it is actually taken from that, how much was changed, if anything was changed at all. But it's not as one-sided as you think. You've got, for instance, a group of kids in the film, and you see when they're first presented, you actually feel a lot of empathy for them because they're being bullied basically by the crime boss and his cronies, where they toss a few of them just over the ledge to fall down to their death. Another is asked to cut off 2 of his fingers. So you feel empathy for this group of kids, but later on it's the same group of kids that try and take on Chris Hemsworth. So it puts you in this awkward situation where you do feel empathy for them, but on the other hand they're trying to get the hero basically. And it's a bit disheartening to see that they stop at nothing. So it's touching upon this child soldier aspect as well, where they use all weapons that they have at their disposal to try and get to him. And you can see that Chris Hemsworth's character is a bit torn, because on the one hand he obviously is trying to fight for survival, on the other hand he's trying to understand why he's fighting kids. Sort of lighten the scene a bit by adding, I suppose you could call it, some semi-humorous moments in there. For instance, on one of them he just uses slaps to put him down basically, and once the scene's done he calls them the Goonies from hell, which I thought was a very funny line to put in the film. But overall it was a very interesting scene, because like I say, it is kind of funny, as these scenes typically are when they end up in action movies where you've got kids fighting grown-ups. But at the same time you also get a touch of the severity of what is actually going on here. The last thing I wanted to touch on is the music in this film, which I quite liked. One thing in particular, you've got this piano theme, this tune that's being played quite often. Actually, Ovi is the one, the son, you see him very early on in the film. He also explains that when he feels tense, he will play the piano. And the tune he plays reminded me of Hans Zimmer's Time from Inception, from the film Inception, which is pretty much my favourite he's ever written. And this theme tune in this film, Extraction, it sounded a bit like it, so I was like, oh. But at first, my first initial thoughts were, oh, copying it a little bit. Then, of course, no, it's just that it's not a copy. But obviously, if you hear a certain tune or group of tunes that are familiar to you, then immediately your mind jumps to it being a copy. Obviously it's not a copy, it is significantly different, but it also explains why I liked it so much, because it was similar in parts to the music that I'm used to from Hans Zimmer. So I quite like that, they carry that tune throughout the film and they add it in for more of an emotional impact. Yes, the last thing I was surprised to read, as I said before, I quickly researched the details of the film, as in who made it, and I was very surprised but pleased to read that the screenplay was actually written by one of the 2 Russo brothers, who obviously now are well known for the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame films. So I was quite pleased about that, to see that they're also doing other things. I know they did other things before they did Marvel comic films, but it was nice to see one of them approaching this. I also assume that's how the connection to Chris Hemsworth came to be. I felt the screenplay was good. I liked the pacing of it. Like I say, the emotion was there. To me, all the elements of this film worked. I thought it was really good. The thing I like about Netflix is they strive to develop films and series in all sorts of countries across the world. So I get the feeling of them as in a truly global production film. Like in this case, the majority of the cast, they are Indian and, well, I think primarily Indian, but I would assume also from Bangladesh. Like I say, the setting is as well, although I believe it was filmed in India. And it's great that they promote these local actors, actresses, film crews, etc. I really like that aspect. I really enjoyed just having it set somewhere completely different that we're not used to. I really enjoyed that. So overall, I recommend that you see this film if you like the action type of film, where it's the one-man army, stuff like that, with some emotional hits as well. I hope you enjoyed the review. Please tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, or how you liked the film, what you have to say about the film in the comments down below. And if you did enjoy, I hope you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Take care.